hello, Lion Quirk.
Hello, how are
Weirdo.
you? Weirdo?
Weirdo. So it's like talking to a comrade, another weirdo. One Lion Quirk to another.
Yes, that's what we're all about.
I would like to start by touching on what makes you a Lion Quirk. You know, specifically, as in, although you have this affinity for all animals and you're very involved with wild animals, and you know you've a lot of your work has been to do with wildlife, but today you're on Lion Quirks as specifically to do with lions. So what makes you a Lion Quirk?
I suppose, yes. When you think about what animal you love to see and which one puts a smile on your face, the first one that comes to mind is a lion. Because they I don't know, they just have all these little habits and things. Well, their general behavior is just like one of those things that you just find yourself loving. And if you go somewhere and there's lions, you're just happy. A lot of people, if you go to like game drive safari things, a lot of people focus on leopard, wild dog, which is fantastic sightings. But for me, if I go anywhere to like Kruger, Pilanesberg, if I see a lion, my whole trip is made. So I suppose that's what's make you a lion quirk, and then you see things about them that other people don't. Yeah, I would say probably that. And then you just, apart from all of that, or addition to all of that, actually, not apart from all of it, but addition to all of that, then you find out more about them. You research them, not only by reading books, but by actually watching them and looking what they're doing. Forgetting that people say that lion sleeps 20 hours a day and they're so lazy, but you actually see the rest, which is just so much fun.
So mainly you're
So,
referring
yeah.
to lions in the wild when you talk about what you've been speaking about now. When you refer to that you will see them, it's when you're driving in a game reserve in South Africa. So that's what you've done a lot of. But right now in your life, you're actually involved with lions on a more, day-to-day basis. Do you want to tell the listeners about that? Where you work, what do you do?
Yeah, so in that regard, a lion's in captivity in a sanctuary where they've actually been saved, and then taken to a safe haven like Lion's Rock or other sanctuaries, then it's very nice to see the progression of their behavior. So to where they come from, like also in a physical state, like if they come to you from a zoo that's in a war-torn area or wherever, and then they come to you and they look quite terribly in a physical condition. They're very horrible looking, thin and full of bad wounds and things like that. So firstly, the physical progression that you see is obviously very amazing, but then also the behavioral progression that you see in these animals from being scared and unsure to actually loving life. So of course we would want to give them Pilanesberg to go and run in and be wild and free and still sort of observe them just to know that they're doing okay. But to just see that in the area that they're in, and it's like they're so grateful, and being a part of taking care of them is absolutely humbling, and just it's such an honor to see this. And it's kind of like they allow you in their little pride, but not like there's a distance, but they're still like, if they see you, they're happy, even though you're probably the person bringing them food. They still see you and they're still happy, and they're like, yay, we do know this person. Normally she's got food, but it's okay if she doesn't. And you see the social side of a lion, and you see the side of a lion where you can be like, you know what, this animal can actually still kill you, but they're so appreciative of you taking care of them. And that's a big honor. I mean, for me, to see these animals on a daily basis and to know their histories, I just feel like obviously I have a job, but it's not a job as your 9 to 5 normal type of job. It's you're not working for a company, you're actually working for them. If you look at what you're doing everything that you do to better their lives in captivity. And you still see the wild side in them, so you still see what you would see in the wild. It can just be a little bit less because they don't have a lot of space. But the behavior and the general sort of being a lion is still there. And yeah, so I think from that side, like the captive and the rescue side, that is what I like most, is that you do actually see a change in them. And it's like fantastic and just really humbling to be a part of it.
Yeah, so at the moment you're working, taking care of lions in captivity in a sanctuary situation. But what led you to being involved with lions? Would you say that there's something about you as a person, something that you saw? Is there something that, like, if I had met you as a child, I would have been able to identify, or you knew about yourself as a child, that basically is part of what led you to be this person who now works looking after lions in a sanctuary?
Well, I can't think that far back. But I mean, as something as a child, yes, I've always had an affinity for animals. Well, actually, I can remember one thing. So if you asked me what animal I used to pretend to be as a child, it would have been
What
a tiger.
animal did you used to pretend to be as a child?
A tiger. So the close cousin to the lion, not quite a lion, but yeah, as I grew up, then if you asked me what's my favorite animal, it would be a lion. I mean, I've worked with lots of different animals. So horses was one of them, but it ended up being lion. And I used to work at a supposed to be sanctuary, but then it turned into a lion farm. And there as well, you kind of, I developed like a bit of a lion personality, or my personality as a lion person developed into itself just by being able to hang out with these lions and these magnificent animals and seeing how they actually do make you part of their pride. So ever since then, if you had to meet me then, you would have said that I was a lion, because I was a little rough around the edges, but the things I used to do is like lion type things, like you want to just be with your close friends, you hang out, you're in the bush, you're outside. Yeah, there's a lot of other things. Let's not mention those, but anyway. And
tell me about that time.
Oh, you want to know, eh?
Yeah.
Well, like I always, since I was little, I loved raw meat. I can eat raw meat any day, anytime, lots. I like to hang out with my close friends, which I would say is pride-like, because I mean, lions hang out with their pride, with their close friends. We used to go walking with them in this particular place. We used to go walking. Well, I used to go walking with them actually, and we just hang out. Like literally, me and a group of lions would hang out the whole day, and you feel home. So it's like more like I developed my lion personality when I was introduced to them, and the opportunity came purely as an opportunity, as we were at this place for a holiday, and this guy had lions. We didn't know he had lions. He had no idea what he was doing. His intentions was good, but eventually, unfortunately, it did go south. But before it went south, we tried to help him, and I started to work for him. And yeah, like just literally fell in with these lions and realized how amazing they are, and that I really bonded with them, obviously, but it's like you have an alignment with them, and you are part of them, and then you become very aware of things that you do that is lion-like. Sleeping 20 hours a day. So yeah.
So when you say that you went on holiday to this place and this guy had lions, mainly for our overseas listeners, can you explain, like, a guy had lions? What exactly does that mean, and how does that come about, that this guy had lions?
Okay, so basically he owned a piece of land, like a farm, and he went to a wildlife auction to buy game. So plains game, things like zebra, impala, other type of antelope, things like that. And these lions were at the auction for sale, but they were actually for sale for hunting. And he just couldn't imagine somebody shooting these magnificent animals. So he bought them without realizing
Are you
that
talking
you
about the
actually
lions?
need. Yes.
Sorry, I'm interrupting you. So he saw lions at the auction.
Yes.
So why were the
No, so he
lions at the
saw these
auction?
lions. Yes, he saw the lions at the auction, yes.
And what
So
are
they
the lions
were
being
part.
auctioned? Is that normal?
Yeah, it is quite a normal thing in South Africa for lions to be auctioned, especially for hunting purposes. Like if you had a farm somewhere and you bought these lions, you would release them on your farm, and you can get an American or South African hunter to come and shoot them on your farm. You make quite a lot of money with it. But he was not really aware of this whole situation, and he honestly thought that he just didn't want these lions to be hunted. So he bought them on auction without realizing he needs permits, he needs enclosures. There's a whole management plan that needs to go with your enclosures. There's a lot of legalities that surround your enclosures. But he was adamant, and he got help from the government. They helped him to set up his little sanctuary. Well, it wasn't a sanctuary. Let's rather just call it his private holding for the lions. And he bought 4 lions. So it was 1 male and 3 females. When they went to the farm from the auction yard, the females were all pregnant. And he also did not know anything about either leaving them with the mother or then raising them if you need to. Because a lot of times lions in captivity will leave the cubs under stressful situation, but he didn't know any of this. And when we went there, the one lioness had already given birth, and there was these 3 little cubs running around. And I worked at a vet before that, so me and the vet, we've had experience with lions and lion cubs. So the vet had taught me what you would need to raise lions. And I told the owner, like, there's actually like a whole management plan that you need to do. There's a lot of supplements, there's a specific milk, there's a lot of things that goes into raising a lion, and it is quite costly, and he didn't know really what to do. So I wrote it all down for him, but like I said, we were only on holiday. So then we left, like me and my friends left the farm, and about a month later he phoned me and he said, can I not come and work for him? Because clearly I knew lions. So that's how I ended up working with lions. Due to a fall-in opportunity.
And then tell me more. Tell us more.
And then,
Those lions, what
well,
happened
and
to
then,
them? Tell us about those cubs. You can't leave us hanging there.
okay. So basically, so I went back and I started working for him. And the other 2 females by then had also given birth. So now there were 8 little cubs. 3 was now about 3 months old. And then the other 5 was like just about a month old. The parents didn't raise them. The lionesses didn't want to raise them, so we did take them from the mothers. We did raise them, but they became my children. Basically, I was with them every day. I would bottle feed and make sure they get their correct supplements and milk, and we would go walking on the farm. The guy that was working with me, so he was basically the maintenance manager of the farm. We would also do felt analysis, and during this time the lions were all around us. They were just doing their lion thing, literally lying around, and then we stayed in the bush basically the whole day, and I stayed with those lions until they were about 4 years old. So this is about the time, unfortunately, that he decided that, well, actually not the owner's son decided that he wants to go into the lion hunting business because it makes quite a lot of money. So before the lion hunting actually happens, there's a whole other business where I think a lot of people is familiar with is lion petting or cub petting and lion walking. So people go to a lion farm, they can pet the cubs, play with them, take selfies with them, do all kinds of things like that. And then there are all the lions that they then use for walking. But these lions always end up either in the bone trade or they end up in the hunting trade. So it was quite difficult, but I had to leave because I was not going to be part of this. So I did leave. So unfortunately, I cannot tell you what happened to most of them. One of them was rescued and taken to Love Lions Life Sanctuary, where she is still living a very, very happy life. It's also a true sanctuary.
That's a spot that I've got to stop you. Several things. Okay. One is you were saying how you would go and do felt analysis and the lions would be all around you and they're doing what lions do, which is mainly just sleeping. I would like to just interject and say they're not only sleeping, right? There are times when those lions are stalking. There are times when those lions are like running and leaping on one another and potentially leaping on you if you turn your back on them, for instance. Or, they're going to lie around in the shade and say in the middle of the day, I'm going to lie here and not do anything. But there are going to be moments when they get into playful mode. What's it like when you're out there with lions who are not sleeping?
Okay, yes, so very true. Yes, they didn't always sleep and they do not always lie around. When they're up and running and playing, you do need to be quite vigilant. Not always just because they're gonna want to hunt you or anything like that, but just the sheer size of a lion. I mean, if a 6-month-old lion runs and jumps into you, you're gonna feel like you've run into a bit of a brick wall. So, when we were busy doing felt analysis, we would always have a little watchful eye on them. A lot of the times they were very happy playing with each other, so they would run around crazy, jump on each other, play with each other, play with whatever they found in the environment, sticks and stones, and climb in the trees if there were big trees nearby. They would come to us for affection and also to try and play with us. And depending on their age and their size, we would either give affection or just play with them a little bit. But mainly they were quite calm in the sense of they never tried to hunt us in that way. Like, it was more just a playful thing of, okay, you are also a lion, so you need to play with us. But obviously from a human perspective, you need to remember that you're human and you don't have fur and a thick skin and like really strong teeth that can just puncture anything. So yeah, you just had to be sort of in your mindset that don't be scared, don't look out for them and think they're going to attack or jump on you any single moment, but be vigilant, be aware and awake to what they are doing, because there were also times that they would play with each other and them jumping on each other could lead then, like them rolling into you or jumping onto you without even actually knowing that you're there, or not knowing that you're there, but you're going to be in the way, so it's just coming and they can just hit you. But it was also amazing because when you are busy working and you see what they are doing, whether they're playing or if they are stalking some of the game, because there is free roaming game on the farm, it was very, very interesting to watch them, because you actually see that even though they weren't raised by a lion mother, the instinct is still there. So they still want to hunt, and they still stalk, and they go into stalking mode, and they try to hunt. They're not successful normally at this point, but they're pure lions still. So it's the hunting is a skill that they get when they grow up, and the mother will obviously train that skill. But you are not a lion mother, or I was not a lion mother, like DNA wise. So I didn't train them to hunt, but it was still there. And yeah, they loved playing. They loved being outside just in general. They would go roaming around. That we sometimes needed to go look for them, but the farm was fenced, so it's not like they could have gotten out. So basically, we would just go.
Okay, sorry, I'm interrupting. That was a question that actually has been playing in my head while you're talking. Is this farm where they're running around in fenced that they can't get to other people? I think it's also to get this full image, because so far it's sounding to me like a very risky business. So the farm is fenced, right? There are no other people working somewhere else on the farm. I mean, I'm imagining, right? This is all done. Only you and the manager that you spoke of, or the groundsman, maintenance guy that you spoke of, are at potential risk, because this is sounding risky.
Yes, no. So it would only be the two of us out in the veld with the lions, especially when they got a lot older. So when they were younger, so say like 3 to 4 months, we would of course let the farm workers know that we are out with them. But at that stage, they would stay quite close to you, or to the person that's raising them. So that was me. The farm manager, or the maintenance manager, he also did help a lot, so they did know him. So they would stay close in our vicinity. And when they got to about a year to a year and a half, we would let the farm guys know, the farm workers, like the general workers, we would let them know, look, we are out with the lions. So if you guys are busy on the farm somewhere, let us know. And so that we can just know that where you are at that point. And when they got to about 2 to 2.5, we would only take them out after we know that everybody else was safe. So then the general workers would either be off the property, or they would be in their houses, and their houses were also fenced in. So that they were living in a yard type area, and then the farm was fenced to the point that they couldn't get out. So the farm was about 200 hectares big, so they had quite a lot of ground that they could run in, but it is fenced. The gate was controlled, so nobody can just enter the gate. If we had guests, because there was a lodge on this farm, we would obviously not let them out until the guests has left. So yes, there was nobody else at risk at that point, when the lions were at an age where they really could inflict damage. And if there were people out, we would let them know to either get to safety, or we would wait and not let the lions out, basically. So, yeah, you always have to remember that they might see the person who raised them in a certain light, as your child would. I mean, your normal human child sees you as a parent. He sees you differently than his uncle or his aunt.
We're saying that the lions see you as that like dogs. In fact, I think you were saying like like the same way that dogs see the person who raises them and their own home. But if somebody else comes along, the dogs are not going to be the same to that stranger.
Exactly. So, and you as the mother in this sense, you need to remember that, and not just think, if someone comes along, it will be fine. Because yes, it could be, but it most likely won't be. And then you are also dealing with lions. You're not dealing with dogs or human children or cats or anything like that. I mean, even dogs can be very dangerous. I mean, if you think about your power breeds, pit bull and German shepherd and these type of things, they can be very dangerous. So you can just imagine a lion like at 200 kilos running into you as a stranger. It's not going to be nice. So yeah, you have to always think ahead, safety first. And if you ever feel like your time has now come that you need to end spending a lot of physical time with them, then you need to really look at it and take it seriously. Because if they're going to feel that, if the lions will feel that you now also retracting or feeling like you're not quite as comfortable anymore, they might just take advantage of that. So that is also part of their wild instinct. Is like, if you are the weakest link, you're going to get left behind. You might be taken out. And if that happens, obviously that's just going to be very, very, very sore and very sad. So if you ever feel like that, then you just need to remove yourself from the situation. Which is sometimes quite sad, because they are very intelligent and they do understand if you leave them. But it is also sad that you can't then interact with them like you used to, because lions are very affectionate. If you look at them wherever, in the wild, in captivity, wherever you see lions, they're always lying together. One is normally touching the other one, even if it's just touching, but they do touch each other. There's a paw somewhere. If they greet each other, it's a headbutt. If one is lying down, and this is a very lion thing to do, if one is lying down and the other one comes, it's not like a headbutt, hey, how are you? It's either let me throw myself down on you, or I'll sit on your head, type of thing. And this is what lions do. Like, this is how they greet each other. This is so much fun for them in one sense. So if you were a part of their pride for such a long time, I think it is quite sad both ways. But it is also then in a matter of speaking, like, if your grown child leaves to go live life, you can't keep your children with you the whole your whole or their whole lives. You need to let them go, live their own life, make their own mistakes, do whatever they need to do. So it's kind of that sort of principle that I think you're looking at.
But if
so yeah,
so, what would happen? What happens when now, you know, the analogy of the child leaving and going off to do their thing in the lion world? Okay, I think on one line you're talking about how it was at the farm you were at, where the lions were pretty much loved and allowed to be lion. But there and elsewhere, if lions are with people and they get to that point where now the people can't be with them anymore, the lions have gotten too old, they're too big, they're going to hurt the people, and also instinctually, as they get older, they now, you know, change into less compliant and maybe wanting to break away from their pride, just instinctually. Where do these lions then go? What happens to the lions on places where they happen to people who just have lions? What happens to those lions next?
Well, the sad truth is that mostly those lions will end up in the canned hunting industry or in the bone trade industry. They could also just end up staying with the people, but in horrible conditions. So small enclosures, sometimes zoo-like camps, like olden zoo, concrete walls, concrete flooring type situations. A lot of the times, when that happens, I won't say a lot of the times, but when that happens, if that lion doesn't receive that affection a lot anymore, or animal in general also, like, they also have a lot of behavioral issues. They have a lot of health issues. So they either become really, really fat, or if the people don't feed them anymore, if the person loses their affection for this animal because now you cannot spend physical time with it, they sometimes just neglect them completely, or they sometimes just, the care goes into, we need to feed it and we need to water it, and that's basically it, and maybe clean the camp. So if it doesn't go for hunting or the bone trade, it just ends up being there like a dog on a chain, but now it will just be in a very small enclosure. There's very few people that would actually give up a lion to a true sanctuary, or an animal, like it could also be a tiger. It doesn't happen a lot that people would give them up, because even though they've sort of lost their general affection for this animal because they cannot interact with it anymore, it's a novelty. So you can always tell your friends, "Ooh, but I have a tiger," or "I have a lion." And then people don't realize, if I have to say people, then I mean like the general public, they don't realize what is going on in the lion world with the bone trade, with the hunting, and they just think, "Oh, cute, you've got a lion," but it's never really the case, and that is the sad part of it.
So
Like I
not
said, there's
quite. So
very
not
few
quite
people.
your. So not quite you're letting your children leave home and go off to live their life or go off to varsity. Not quite that happy ending. So when
No.
I want to pull back to you were saying how not everyone will then give their lion over to a true sanctuary. And earlier on you had touched on your one lioness who was, as you said, sort of rescued out of the situation and sent off to the sanctuary. Of course, I know her very, very well, Puku. So, so let's talk a little bit about Puku. Puku, you are, for all intents and purposes, Puku, who for our listeners' benefit, Puku is a lioness, who's 9 years old now, and Yolandie is, for all intents and purposes, Puku's mother. So, tell us a little bit about Puku. She's one of the
Puku.
lionesses that used to walk around with you, and she's one of the
Yes.
reasons you got involved with lions, right?
Yes. So I actually, just before we started, I went through some old emails because my Gmail said my email box is full. And I found the permits that you sent, the transport permits. And your, the little message was, "Here's the transport permits for Puku Shmuku." So it was quite a giggle. Puku Shmuku. So Puku, was born on Kudujris. This is where I used to work quite a long time ago. There were two lions that was born. So there was a male and a female. The mother actually ate the male, and I thought, okay, if she's going to do that, then she'll probably eat the other one, and then maybe I can convince the owner that, you see what happens with lions in captivity, so can we just please not breed anymore? Because this is the sort of also in the time that the owner's son became involved a lot in the farm, and he wanted more cubs, and I was trying to get him to see that you don't actually need cubs to make money. You can make money in different ways. So Puku was then born because he had put the male with the females, and like I said, so there were these two little cubs. The female had eaten the one, so I thought, okay, maybe she'll eat the other one. And little Puku
Why?
survived for a week. Why did she eat the babies? Or the baby?
Yeah.
There could be various reasons. It could be that because they're in captivity, and these lion farms, want a lot of cubs for cub petting and then eventually lion walking. There could be deficiencies, like physiological deficiencies. There could be deformities, like on the physical side. It could be that the mother is depleted, so because they overbreed the females a lot of the times. And if the cubs have deficiencies or deformities, even in the wild, it is a natural instinct for them then to eat the cubs. Because especially in the wild, they will not necessarily survive. It's actually very rare that they would survive in the wild if they had a physiological or a physical deformity. In captivity,
But this would be more
like I
often
said,
in captivity, right? That there's a potential for
yes,
physiological deformities and more likely in captivity because of inbreeding or because of the mother being back-to-back bred. But stress
Yes.
would also play a
Yeah.
role, right? Because there's in the mother eating the cubs or turning the cubs away. I imagine in the wild, what would drive a mother other than the fact that the cub potentially is deformed? What else would drive her to eat the cubs? Maybe other lions potentially trying to eat the cub. She feels stressed. She wants to protect the cub. So potentially as a way of protecting the cub, she may try and take it back in, put it somewhere back where it's safe. But would that happen more in captivity?
Yes.
Do you think?
That would definitely happen more in captivity, because also in the wild, normally when they're going to give birth, they leave the pride. The mother leaves the pride. She sometimes has a surrogate sister, and this is for safety. This is for their safety. It's for the cub's safety. So in captivity, a lot of the times there would be some sort of a shelter, but they cannot actually go where they would want to go or would feel the need to go to protect the cubs. So yes, everything you've mentioned now, from the deformities, the stress, the overbreeding of the female, those are all reasons why they could eat the cubs in captivity. And in captivity, it is also more likely that those things would happen because they cannot do what they would naturally do. So yes, so unfortunately, even in the wild, if they do this, it could also be deformity, but it could also be a first-time mother that sometimes they're just a little bit unknowledgeable in the sense of raising the cub. But yeah, so when this happens, then if she eats one cub of the litter, then normally they will eat the whole litter. And I thought this is what's going to happen. So I left the other little lion there for now and thought, okay, you know what? I'll give it some time. And this was sort of part of my motivation to not breed and to actually become a sanctuary. But this didn't work. And then little Puku survived for about a week alone with the lioness. She obviously managed to drink in between somewhere. And then I decided, well, now it is time to take her away. Very feisty. Little cub. She was 7 days old when I took her. Now, well, not really now from the mother, because the mother was not really around, but I took her out from the enclosure from where the mother was. Very feisty, but there was a couple of things, like she struggled to breathe for the first day or so. It wasn't even a 2-hour feeding. It was just being awake with her the whole time to make sure that she is breathing. But after the second day, the feistiness just grew. And when she was about a month old, then I could see that there was something wrong with her back legs. So it would be, at that stage, it was difficult to tell what it would be, but you could see that she was struggling to walk, in the sense that it looked like her back legs was a little bit like robotics, if I can put it like that. And this is most likely why the mother ate the other cub, is because maybe in the other cub it was even worse. So you never know, but you could sort of just derive it from the fact that she had bad hips, actually, eventually we found out. And because after she was about 3 months, we took her for the first vet check, and this is where we found that she had hip dysplasia, but the vet said she should be all right. We'll just need to give her special supplements, extra supplements. We would need to do sort of little exercises with her, things like this. She was, at that stage, the only cub that we had. And then I did manage to separate the male from the females. So for about 7 or 8 months, she was the only lioness, like little tiny lioness that I had. All the others at this stage were already like 2 years old. So there's no way that you could put her with them, because they will no doubtly kill her. So yes, it was me and Puku, and we did everything together. She was my little shadow. She walked everywhere with me. And because she was the only one, you obviously feel the need to give more love and more affection and allow her more freedom, in a sense, to be with you as much as she wants and as much as she needs. And we had a bond. The bond just grew, and it just grew bigger and bigger. And well, I don't know if you're familiar with the starfish story. I'm not sure who first told it, but anyway, there is a story about a man walking on a beach, and he can see a man in the distance, and it looks like the man is dancing. And as he gets closer to this man, the dancing man, he sees, but he's not dancing, he's throwing starfish back into the ocean. And the man gets to this guy that's throwing the starfish in the ocean, and he's like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "I'm throwing the starfish back in the ocean." And he's like, "Yeah, but you're not really going to make a difference." So the man picks up another starfish, he throws him back in the ocean, and he's like, "I've just changed this world." And he picks up another one, and he throws it in the ocean, and he's like, "And I've just changed that world." So that story kind of led me to be like, well, if I'm not going to be able to convince this person to create a sanctuary for, at that stage, it was about 27 or 28 lions, or animals actually in general, then I will try to save at least one. And then eventually I bought her, and she was mine. And then I knew I had to find a safe place for her. So as long as I was at that farm, she would stay with me, because I could still be with her. We could be together. It was fine. But when she was about 2, then I left this place, because then it really started to become very bad, where lions were being sold quite often, and I knew that they were going to go for hand hunting or bone trade, and I knew I had to get out. So I left, and Puku came with me. So I did ask quite a few places if they could take her, like true sanctuaries. Whereas at that stage, mostly the answer was like, we would need to build an enclosure or do fundraisings, which obviously, yes, I understood. But then a friend of mine said that he can actually take her. And he has enclosures where he works, and his lions were there. So his lions were also in a capacity of sort of just more private keeping. He didn't breed. The lions were also on a farm, and that was more just for aesthetics than anything else, because then you've got the roaring and all of this. So there was no breeding on this farm. There was only 8 lions in total on this farm. Now with Puku there were 9. And so she went to this different farm. Konkuru was the place's name. This is where she went, and she was then safer from hunting or the bone trade. And I was still quite close to her, so I could still go and see her. And they allowed me to go and see her. I wasn't allowed to take her out, really. I did take her out once or twice, and then she caught a Nyala. But the Nyala, in all honesty, was not very clever, and he got stuck. So that's why she caught him. And then the owner was like, nope, now she can't be going out anymore. So then we had to stay inside. But he did allow me to go into the enclosure with her, which gave me a lot of, what do you call it? Comfort, I suppose. And it also gave her some comfort just to get used to the new place. She was alone in the enclosure at that stage. She was next to a male and another male with 3 females. And then there were 2 or 3 young lions next to her, or across from her as well. But they were all a bit older than she was, so we couldn't put them all together. So she stayed there for about a year. We did put her with a male eventually, but there was no breeding because she was still too young to breed. So nothing happened. The male was at that point also vasectomized, so even if something happened, nothing would happen. There would be no babies. And we put them together basically because we know that lions are very social and they do like to be together. And it's just not to be alone. So they were fine together. I still went to visit her, but then I would close him inside and I would still go in with her. And then eventually, Love Lions Alive said that I can actually bring her there, which I really needed to, because at Kunkuru there was a poisoning where they poisoned, I think 4 of the lions had died because of the poisoning. This also happens because of the bone trade. And obviously I was very, very scared. So, and then the journey started to go to Love Lions Alive, and now she's there ever since 2019. And
Okay, so
very happy.
The poisoning, this is a very alarming and absolutely shocking thing. So the poisoning, before she came to Love Lions Alive, which was to me, I know when you phoned that morning in an absolute panic because the other lions had actually been poisoned. So the poisoning means that lions literally die. They eat poisoned chicken and die. So it was the most horrific thing. And I remember that morning very clearly when you phoned, and then the next few weeks how we went into, panic stations to get everything organized this side and bring her over. But I'd like you to just go back, if you will. I know it's terrible, but back to the actual poisoning. What does it mean? What happened and why?
So basically, with the poisoning, yes, they use a poison we call two-stroke or two-step, which is organophosphates, which kills most animals, or all animals, not most animals, it kills all animals. It's not detectable really by the animal. I mean, you don't need a lot to kill a lion. And because these lions are in captivity, it's quite easy to poison them. You just throw some food for them. And they will come and they will eat it, unless they're very, very full, but they might still come and eat it. And yes, on that morning when Adam had phoned me, he was the guy that was looking after the lions mainly, and he had told me, I did go into a very, very big panic. I didn't know what to do. I was panicked but relieved that Puku was not one of the victims. The lions that they wanted was the male with the big females, because they're adult, complete, fully grown lions. And the reason after it is because if the lions are dead, then the guys that wants the bones will go and get the bodies. So it's a bit tricky to explain, but it could be what we call an inside job. So it could be the general workers on that farm that realized that they could get quite a lot of money. They could have been bribed by other people that had realized there's lions on this farm that knew that they could get a lot of money. So sometimes the general worker wouldn't know exactly what's happening, but he would have been bribed and he would have been happy that he'd got a lot of money and just given the lion a special chicken. That's actually a whole subject on its own. But so that would be sort of the main reason is to get the carcass. And obviously it's much easier to pick up a dead lion than a live lion, because a live lion will fight you, it will kill you. So then the lions are dead. You can still sell the bones because the poison doesn't actually affect the bones of the lion. But it kills them. And this is probably why there was a poisoning. And like I said before, I think the reason why Puku and her partner at that stage wasn't poisoned was just because she wasn't fully grown, or perhaps the guys didn't know that there were so many. But yes, then we started to get permits ready. I wanted to move her straight away, but obviously you can't. You do need permits. I needed a space for her to go to. And basically what happened is me and Adam, that also the other lions were his, we basically then shared the financial responsibility of a guard. So then there would be a guard 24 hours a day watching them, literally watching the lions, watching people coming in and out, making sure that the only food that they get is the food that was given by Adam, that there was no other food given, making sure that there is just nobody else around. And we had to do this for about, I don't know, help me out here, I think maybe 6 weeks or 8 weeks. I can't remember exactly. But yes, it was horrific. And I think the worst part for me also was that I wasn't even close to her then anymore. I was at that point working at Tula Tula, which is all the way in KZN. And she's on a farm in Beesterkraal, which is outside Brits. So you're talking about completely two different provinces. So she was in the northwest, I was in the KZN, and I couldn't even just get to her. Like, for me to get to her would take 2 hours drive and an hour flight, at the most.
No, it was
Or at the
terrible.
least, sorry.
And it took over 6 weeks for us to get the permit to move her. Even telling government that this was an urgent situation and the other lions had been killed and you're paying for a guard to be there to protect her life, it still took us over 6 weeks to get the permit to move her from there to Love Lions Alive Sanctuary. And then, of course, at the sanctuary, from our side, it's always a matter of, you've already touched on this, but it's always a matter of, we have to build an enclosure. And that's what every sanctuary has this issue is, yes, we're willing to take lions in. That's why we exist. But we always have to then do fundraising in order to build an enclosure and to get the lions to us. And then obviously after that, it's ongoing care forever. But I'm going to circle back here to, you spoke about once the vet was involved and he explained to you about you needed to add supplements, you needed to change the diet. So I've seen this as well. Diet, nutrition is vitally important when it comes to the lions. So going to your job now, that you work with lions all the time in a big sanctuary where there are lions coming in from all over the world, a lot of lions. What are the sort of the main things that you see as far as what sort of suffering, what sort of conditions, what do you see in the lions that come in from captive situations?
Well, I'd say the two things that we see the most is inbreeding. So there's physical or physiological deformities. If you think of a video, if you watch a lion walk, something like National Geographic's, his toes are pointing forward normally, and he just goes up, and then the foot would go inward and down, outward, but would be forward. So one of the deformities we see most is where the feet is actually like this and not like this. So that's already like calcium deficiency. Just to name one, there's also one we call vitaminosis A, where it's basically a deficiency of vitamin A, which causes the skeleton not to grow sort of in the correct way. And then I think the second largest thing is that you see that there was no supplements given. So inbreeding and then supplements. So supplements that is actually more the vitaminosis A, that falls under the supplements. And then you also find that they've got a lot of skeletal issues. They are either kind of hunched up. Once you do x-rays, you can see spondylosis in like a 2-year-old animal, which you shouldn't see. And this is all signs that there was either inbreeding or a lack of supplementation given. So yeah, like there's there's so many that comes to mind. If I think about
mental, emotional trauma,
everything. If I think about, there was a tiger they saved. This is Lions Rock. He's from the Gaza Zoo, and it was a war zone at the time, and the zoo was abandoned. He was one of 15 animals left in the zoo. The other tigers were mummified. So, given that he was an adult, and then he came to Lions Rock, but he only got meat to eat. There was no supplementation given. The meat was not even necessarily good quality meat. It could have been old or rotten or just also too little. He was extremely scared. I haven't known him since he's been there, but I've watched camera footage of him, and he was very scared. He used to sit in the corner, he used to shake his head like all the time, just going like this. And as soon as he came to Lions Rock, they would get a vet visit, and the vet would actually then inform the caregivers or the caretakers what supplements he would need. And like I said, from the first footage I've seen to about 5 months after, he was responsive. So in this time where he was lying like this and just shaking his head, you would call him and he wouldn't look at you. He would rather cower to the sound of something happening around him. And then 5 months later, when the caretakers then called him, he would actually look at them and respond and sort of be more alert and just aware of his complete general surroundings. Another 4 months, I think, later, then you could see his whole coat changed. So his coat was very raggedy. It looked kind of wet and just not great in any sense. And then in about 9 months, he had this very smooth coat and he would respond better. He started to walk better. So yes, in every capacity, mental, emotional, physical. I mean, I normally start with the physical and the physiological because that's normally what you see first. A lot of people, well, not in our industry, because in our industry, people would know these things because we do work a lot with it. But for the general public, people would not always know. They might think, okay, it's funny that this thing is sitting here looking like this. But they might not know that this is actually not just his environment, but it is also to do with the fact that he didn't have the correct supplements and didn't have the correct food and correct
Yeah, it isn't it absolutely amazing watching these animals recover, like the depth of their ability, their resilience to come back from the worst of conditions, physically and mentally. It's quite amazing. What do you think are like the main factors that contribute to the recovery of these cats when they get into sanctuary?
Right. So, yeah, I think one of the main factors is obviously the fact that they're going to get now good food. Just the quality of the food without the supplements even is already like a big factor. Adding the supplements, it makes it an even bigger factor. Their general environment, coming from a very stressful environment, being or having to be on high alert all the time, to an environment where it's actually calm and quiet and content. There's shelter if you need, if you want. You can also just be outside, so they've got options. And then also, I do believe the caretakers have a big impact, because also going from where a human would be viewed as just giving me food, or perhaps giving me food, but sometimes in a situation like that, like in if an animal is in a worn-torn area, the person that is there could also be very stressed, and also not be in the best of mental capacity or emotional status. So they could be loud, they could do things to get this animal to sort of react quickly by scaring it even more. So then just by now seeing a caretaker not just as a person that brings you food or this thing that brings you food, but it's also quiet and respectful, and you know, like that animal would eventually realize that, okay, you know what, I don't need to be afraid of this person. This person that now brings me food is actually calm and content, and I get good food and I get clean and good water. Well, they don't really, I think they do know the supplements in a sort of a way because they can taste it on the meat, I'm sure, but it's not a thing in their head like, oh, I get supplements now. But yeah, so I think those are three of your main factors: is just good food, good environment, and your caretaker. Because I mean, each animal that comes in has individual needs, and if you find an animal for instance, if you find a cub, whether it's lion or tiger, you're going to need to raise it close to you. How else are you going to do it? You can't just put it in an empty enclosure. So you're going to need to be affectionate with it. You're going to need to give it everything it needs, including love. Because even like a tiger or a puma, which is a solitary cat, once that cat has babies, they become very affectionate towards those babies. So then you as the caretaker, would then need to see each animal individually and see what that animal needs and then give it to them. If they reach a point by 6 months and they're like, okay, I don't need you anymore, I'm quite capable and happy to be on my own, then you can let it go. But then the food and the supplement is also individualized, because you might have one animal that needs more vitamin A and another animal that needs more calcium or whatever. So even that you would also need to take in consideration. And then also add it to a factor that would change this animal's life. I think those are the main things.
Environment. So you list environment as one. So environment would, of course, include sunshine, room to move, to be able to exercise, stimulation, mental stimulation, physical stimulation, that they can actually do things. But another part of environment, like you speaking about the cubs needing that one-on-one care with their caregiver, because they need the physical attention and loving and bonding, which the adults also need. So if you're getting in older lions, not talking about cubs, but older lions or tigers, but cats that are coming in, part of the environment would then be for them to maybe meet, especially with the lions who are social pride animals. How does that work? If you get in lions, would you then work at bonding them, at socializing them, at how important is introducing them to other lions? How important to their welfare on every level is it to be with companions?
Yeah, so specifically with lions, if you get in adult lions, it would be one of your first considerations to try to socialize them with another lion. So if you get a group of lions, but they were separated in the moving or the transportation, then you should try to socialize them. Absolutely. If you've got two individual lions from different places, you absolutely need to try to socialize them. This could take days, weeks, months, years, but you, from your side, just need to do that all the time. Because if you look at lions in a general perspective, yes, the males go off and they want to go and do territorial patrols, but the first thing they do when they come back is to socialize with the group. So being social for a lion is like one of the most important things in his whole life. It even outranks eating. So it's like, I'd rather social than before I eat. So yeah, absolutely. You would need to see if you, whether it was a single animal that you got in, whether it was two, whether it was a group, like I say, you would need to see from your side as a sanctuary and as the caregiver, what can I do for a social environment for this animal? If it's a solitary animal, like a tiger, for instance, you can argue it both ways. You can argue it to the way that, okay, they are solitary, so they do live alone. The only time that a solitary cat would get together with another cat is for mating or when the mother has cubs. But now you're coming into captivity, so you could even then try with solitary animals to bond them with others. If that animal came from perhaps a situation where the social group was people, then even if you cannot interact with them physically, you do need to spend time with them. So yes, it's behind a fence, but spend time with them, try as much as possible, and just give that animal what they need. because now every Sunday, if it comes from a place where it had a lot of affection to a place where it's got no affection, that can then also regress into behavioral problems and mental and emotional problems. So, no, absolutely, you need to like check. And then, like with the socialization, it can be quite tricky. You obviously need to be careful, but you get cues from the lions. So, if you watch them, so there's a basic sort of way, or like, no, not a basic way. Let me not put it like that. There's a few steps that you would do. Sort of first, you would put the lions next to each other in their each enclosure. Oh, they're each in their own enclosure, and then you would swap them out to each other's enclosures. And this, like I said, this can take months, it can take years, but you would do it as often as you can, and then you would need to watch them, watch their reaction, watch what they're doing. Their reaction could also differ daily. Like today, they could be quite happy to be in the next enclosure, and then the next day they could be very unhappy. So you also need to just look at these things and watch them and see how it goes. And then you need to then obviously see how they respond to each other. And once you feel, so it does have a lot to do with you as the caregiver as well. Like you also need to feel comfortable with the cues that they will give you. That, okay, you know what, today you're going to open this gate. And when you do that, you will have probably all your staff available. You will have meat somewhere stashed away. So you don't want meat right next to you because then they might fight just over the meat. You will have the vet there with a dart gun, or if you have like a blowpipe or something like that, although you need a dart gun, you need range, then you will have all your safety precautions there, that in case something happens, then you can actually intervene. So yeah, no, it is very important to socialize them. And you could also then see a very big behavioral change. Quite recently, we lost an animal, a lioness, to a snake bite, and we can already see a regression in her sister, basically. I can put it like that. They were together for 9-10 years, and now every suddenly the sister died because of a snake bite, and she's already regressing into the point that she's retracting. She's not coming to us. She's shy, she's hiding, and this would be sort of, you do need to not see it as an ideal time, but you would need to use this time where she is still a bit insecure of what is actually going on to see how she would respond to a different lion. So she is next to a male, for instance. Give her some time to mourn properly, because they do mourn, and then try to get her to interact with this male as soon as possible to see. If she wants to then rather interact with a person, then do that for a while. So like I said, you would need to look at the cues that the lions also give you, or the animal. So yeah.
So that interacting with a person is obviously through a fence, just for the listeners' attention. So we're now talking about a sanctuary.
Yes.
So everything that you're explaining now is how it happens in the sanctuary that you work in. The same applies with my sanctuary, because in a sanctuary this is how we operate. So it would be between a fence, but yes, you give that cat what that cat needs. And sometimes there is just this window of opportunity. With the lioness whose sister was and that's very sad about the snake. Is that common? Because snakes in Africa are common, and I mean, it's something like, just recently I had a snake. Our jaguar Amazon had a big fight with a puff adder in her enclosure, and she won. Amazon won, and she actually ate the puff adder. But it's a thing.
Yeah, yeah. I wouldn't say it's a common occurrence. Normally snakes don't like cats. And it's a mutual feeling. Cats don't like the snakes either. So, yeah, actually it's happened. This is the second time it's happened in the year. Apparently it's only the second time in 18 years, but like second time in a year. It's quite rare. But yeah, I wouldn't say it's a common thing. But it is very sad, like you say. Why it happened, like I've just said, that they don't like each other, so naturally they would try to avoid each other. But it, we weren't there. Obviously, we're not inside the enclosure, so we're not with the lions 24/7. We basically with our morning fence checks. So literally checking the fence, seeing that the fence is still fine in every order and that the electric fencing is still working. Those are the fence checks. This was reported to us that she was limping and that her leg was swollen. And we're very lucky to have an on-site vet, and she had gone over and then determined that it was definitely a snake bite. So yes, I wouldn't say it's a common occurrence. In the wild, it's very difficult to tell how many times lions and snakes interact. There is videos on YouTube and National Geographics where you see that they have a fight where the young lions could want to play with them because obviously it's a moving thing, so they would want to try and play with it. Older lions knows a bit better, so they would try to kill it. But yeah, if the snake gets a good strike in, then unfortunately, depending on the snake, but also depending on the animal, they do succumb to the venom. But yeah, it's not a common occurrence. We do regularly check the enclosures, especially in summer and like in springtime. We do check because that is normally when your snakes would start moving around. So we will check under rocks, we will check in their shelters, we will check in their houses to see if we do see snakes. And if we see snakes, we try to remove them for their safety but mainly for the lion safety. So, and then also for the human safety, because obviously most of these snakes are quite venomous. I mean, the snakes that we find most here in the Free State is the puffadder and the what's the other one? I've forgotten the name.
Spitting cobra.
The wrinkles.
I
wanted to say the rattlesnake, and I'm like, we don't have rattlesnakes.
No, wrong country.
Yeah.
Yolandie, you were earlier on where you were talking about the lions that used to walk freely with you when they were younger on that first farm, and then when they get older and they are now, it's either too dangerous for them to walk with people, etc. All of that, you spoke about them being put into small areas. I want to talk about this small areas and space. How important is it for lions to have space, and how important is what is inside that space to the lions? And this is leading me to then talk to you about a concept that you were very excited about and telling me about in a way that people could potentially give more space to lions. So I'm opening that door for you to now talk about space and that concept.
Right. So, I think space is quite important to them, but I also think what is in the space is very important to them. So again, I'm going to go back to wild lions. So if you look at wild lions, firstly, they have a territory. Their territory can be 50 hectares and it can be 10,000 hectares. It would depend on the size of the pride, actually. And then you also have what they call a home range, which is basically multiple territories overlapping. If I say multiple territories, it would be different prides. So, but yeah, they do overlap. And I mean, if you think about it, lions can walk. Well, they can walk as far as they want to walk, but they can walk about like 10, 20, 50, 80 kilometers in a night if they needed to, or if they wanted to, either for food. There would be a reason behind it, basically. So, yes, I would say space is very important. But then it is equally important of what is in that space. If you're going to have 10 hectares of flatland and there's maybe one tree and then just grass, I think your lions will get very, very bored. because there's nothing to do. There's no rocks. There's no bigger trees to climb in. There's no maybe little valleys or rivers or something to keep them entertained. Something where perhaps if hopefully it's a group, they can actually hide behind something and they play nicely like that. Or if they just wanted to lie somewhere in the shade of the rock or climb a tree, your lions would get very bored. But if you had 10 hectares or if you had 2 hectares and there was rocks and valleys and riverines and little hills and things inside, then your lions could very well stay very entertained and stimulated, because they would need to go and look around a corner and around a tree and in the valley to see what is going on, what is happening. I mean, yes, it will still be an enclosed space, so nothing can actually move in and out of it. But an enclosure doesn't have a roof on it, so you can have birds come in, smaller critters can come in like mongoose or mice or things like this. So these types of things can come in. But just to give the lions that sort of idea of there could be something behind that rock today. You never know, so it makes them wonder, it makes them think. And then obviously in a sanctuary setup like we are in, if you've got 10 hectares, it would be quite time consuming. I don't want to say difficult, it's not difficult, but it would be quite time consuming to go and do something stimulating for them. So you can either place logs, you could plant a tree if you had the facilities or the abilities to do that. You can dig holes or hang things from the tree, anything like that to stimulate them. But in 10 hectares, it would take you quite a long time, and it would obviously be spaced quite a bit. Whereas in 2 hectares, you can actually do quite a few things to stimulate these lions. So you can be all natural and just use completely natural things, rocks, logs, like you told me about you wrapping the skin around a log or a stick, and then the lions would play with that for hours and hours. And I mean, that sounds like so much fun, and it's completely natural. At the sanctuary I work at, we do use more humanized things like cardboard boxes and spice and things like this. They do love it, but natural is always better. So yes, in a 2 hectare space, you can then put a lot more stimuli for them. And then they can go and check it out and play with it. But then also keep in mind that it's only 2 hectares. They will cover the entire space probably in about half an hour. So you would need to go in and do something really great to keep them busy. With a new concept that was introduced sort of was to basically have multiple spaces. So the size is variable. Let's say, let's use 2 hectares just for an example. So let's say you've got 8 or 12 enclosures that's right next to each other with gates in between, and each enclosure looked differently. So literally one could be a desert and the other one could be a forest. And then there's one that's half and half, or there's one that has water and the others doesn't. Then you've got both size and stimuli together. And then basically you would need to go and open the gates if you're going to do it manually. Well, let's start rather with, if you've then got a pride of lions that you know that can be together and then they're not going to fight, and you've now placed them in this concept environment where they can actually make a choice. Do I want to go to the desert? Do I want to go to the forest? Do I just want to lie in the river, wherever? Then you can actually see a lot more natural behavior from the lions, because they will have the choice to go wherever they need to go and to do what they want to do. So I think space and stimuli is equally important in your environment for them. And if you look at natural roaming of a lion, they don't, like, a pride will not in its immediate vicinity use 10,000 hectares, but they will walk there and they will find different things and they will have different smells and they won't know what's past the 1 kilometer mile because they would not necessarily be able to see what's past the 1 kilometer mile, obviously. And in this concept, you also create that. You create that sort of uncertainty where it's more natural for them. So that in itself is already a stimuli. So it just sort of keeps them wondering, like, what is going on next door? Because maybe they can hear other lions, or they can smell other lions, or they can smell other animals, but they don't see them. So they're naturally wondering what is happening. And then they would want to go and explore. So if the size was, again, like, if your 2 hectares then turned into 10 hectares, it would take them longer to obviously explore each enclosure, but they will go from one to the next to the other. And they can also be different. I mean, you can have a 10 hectare, 2 hectare, 5 hectare, 3 hectare, doesn't matter. This is what actually is so great about this concept, is that you can literally do anything with it and still be safe and still be in your sanctuary legalities and legislation and things, and actually give them more to do. And this will, again, have an impact on their behavior because we were talking about the socialization before. So now, if you think about it, that animal will kind of show you itself. You wouldn't really need to be a part of it and do the rotation and the training. You would still do it, but they would do it themselves, basically. They would be like, I want to go and see what is next door. I want to go into this guy's territory. I feel comfortable and confident enough that I can go into his territory. There will be a safety aspect that you will not allow them to fight.
Yeah. So a very important aspect here that I don't think was mentioned is that there are gates between these different areas. So if each one of these is like, say, a cell, each one is a cell, whether it's a 2 hectare, 5 hectare, whatever size cell, but between these, there are gates. So, because you've mentioned now that like one pride or one lion, whoever is in one of these cells, could hear or be interested in something that's going on in another cell. They can't just go there and obviously fight and get killed because lions are territorial, but you've got a gate system. So how does that work?
So the gate system would work with artificial intelligence. So lions in captivity and in true sanctuaries are always microchipped. It's a tiny little microchip somewhere, normally in the neck or the butt. We've actually got lions that's chipped in the chin. And so, yes, these gates between these cells would then pick up the chip, and it can pick it up from maybe about 500 meters. If the lion is about 500 meters away from the gate, then it will pick up the chip number and it will tell you, okay, lion A and B is on the way to lion C. Do you want to open the gate? So you as the caregiver would still have the power to open or close the gate because you would know if A and B is going to fight with C. And if you see that, okay, they won't fight, it is a pride that can be together, or lions that can be together, then you can open the gate. But you can also leave it closed. Because, again, if they smell and hear another lion or another animal that they could potentially be with, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to get there. There could be other obstacles in the wild that makes them not being able to get there. So, with an artificial system like that, you as the caretaker will still be able to have some sort of control. Because yes, if you then got 2 completely different prides and they cannot be together, and then you see, okay, pride A is on the way to pride B and they can be together and the gate is open, then you can actually close the gate. So it always remains safe for people, for the animals. But
I love it.
It just gives them that complete sort of naturality on how they would maybe want to move. And then you will also see behavioral changes because they'll be like, oh, hang on, we're now in somebody else's territory. Should we be vigilant? Should we not? What is happening? Or perhaps, oh, actually, I remember this person. Maybe maybe, or not person, sorry, lion. But maybe, it could be like a reunion and they're very happy to see each other.
Yeah. I love it.
So
So
this
the
concept,
big thing about that concept is space and money. Like, I just love it. I can see doing so many things with that concept myself if I just had a huge amount of land and the money to do it. But it sounds absolutely wonderful. I mean, lions in captivity are literally, am I right in saying they are in captivity pretty much? That's it. So to give lions in captivity such a wonderful, diverse experience, because what hurts my heart every single day here, as much as we try and give each one of these cats the best and most natural environment that they can have in captivity, it's still absolutely wrong. I need to start wrapping up, but that is my final question to you is, having been with cubs, having raised Puku, loving Puku to this day, still being Puku's mom, even though she lives with me and you only get to visit, do you believe that do you believe in cubs being born in captivity and then looking after animals in captivity, even though you do it? And ultimately, is this the right way to go? That we've got, you and I both live for lions and look after lions in captivity every single day of our lives, but is what we're doing right?
it's sort of a non-tricky situation. What we do, yes, it's right. Because unfortunately, this is not only a problem that we're facing in South Africa, this is actually a worldwide problem. And if you were to close down, if you and I and the other true sanctuaries were to say, right, we're giving up, we're closing down, then the suffering will actually increase greatly, because we're not only caring for the cats in our sanctuaries, we are also fighting against zoos and breeders and people who has lions for entertainment reasons or whatever. We are fighting against it. So I think what we're doing are right. I would, like you say, of course, it's not right that they are in this situation, but unfortunately, we do not live in an ideal world anymore. If, like you say, if we could give them all a Pilanesberg or 200 hectares of complete and utter freedom, then we would, but we can't. So what we're doing is definitely right. There shouldn't be lions born in captivity, except if it's a very, very rare exception, maybe where, I don't know, I can't even actually think of one. I'm trying to think of a very, very rare exception, but I can't even think of one, because this is also something that we know is one of the biggest excuses of the lion farms. It's like, oh, it was an accident. Famous last words, it was an accident. So perhaps if you rescued a lion from a zoo, there we go, there's an exception, hang on. If you've rescued a lion from a zoo or a place like this, and this lion is pregnant, then the authority kind of lies with you whether you're going to abort or whether you're going to raise the cub. Let's say the cub is already born and it has a decent chance of a life, then I would say yes, give it a decent chance of a life. You don't need to go and kill this poor animal now. Like, you can actually try to just give it a better life than where it came from. This doesn't happen a lot though. Like I said, it's a very rare exception. It took me some time to think about it. But absolutely no breeding. Don't ever believe anything that South African farmers tell you, because they will, or the lion farmers, sorry, not the South African farmers, but the South African lion farmers, because they will tell you all types of lies and stories and how it was a little accident and how this and how that. So that's not true. But yes, I absolutely believe in what we do. If you do research, you don't even have to do a lot of research, but if you do research, you will find that lion breeding is not just a problem in South Africa. It is a problem here. It's a problem in places like Vietnam, Ukraine, Pakistan, where it's also not only lions, it's also tigers, jaguars. I haven't heard of a lot of cougars, but I'm sure like pumas or cougars is one of them, where these animals are bred purely for the purpose for their bones, because there's also a lot of cultural belief behind it. China is one big one below. And if we don't do what we do, then these people will carry on what they do. So I absolutely do believe in what we do. I would really want to give them a huge space where they can run in and play in and just be lions and not having to worry about things. But like I said before, we don't live in an ideal world anymore. So
How big a
yes, keep
space
going.
how big a space would they need to be in, do you think, to be able to be lions, but even to be able to breed, even to be able to hunt? Well, let's start with hunting. How big a space, and is that plausible? Is it possible? Can we do that with our rescues and captive bred lions?
You won't really be able to do it with your rescues or captive bred lions. I mean, you can put them in a bigger space. As of to how big, I suppose that would just sort of depend on your financial availability, and also a little bit on the lions, in the sense of would they be able to handle it in a physical, mental, emotional capacity. But let's say we're talking about a healthy pride that potentially could breed, like you say, in a wilder space. If they have to breed in a wilder space, it's always tricky, because you would still need to manage them. Because then, let's say, so legally, if you had very big land, your legal limit, or the minimum hectares is 5,000 to keep 3 lions. As you know, lions breed very well. So within the first, say, let's not make it in the first year, let's make it in the first 2 years, you would potentially gone from 3 lions to possibly 12 or even 15 lions. In a 5,000 hectare space, which maybe sound a lot, but lions, like we said before, they can have huge territories. And like now you've got 15 lions, and what are you going to do? Are you going to bring in more lions to prevent interbreeding? And then where are you going to go with these other lions? Because unfortunately, Kruger Park or your national parks in South Africa, they either have an equilibrium of lion population, or they have too many lions, and they also have to manage them. So if you want that 4 lions and you are able to give it to them, you can perhaps look at either vasectomizing your male, and then you basically giving them 5,000 hectares, and vasectomizing the male he will still want to mate and want to breed, so they will still go through their sort of natural hormone cycles, but the females will just never get pregnant. So potentially you could do that, but then you're not breeding. So the moment you want to breed, and it's not in a space like Kruger where there's other lions that will take those lions out, or other animals that will kill them naturally, you are going to have to manage them yourself, and then think about how you're going to do that. So there are ways, like I said, either vasectomizing the male, you can sterilize the females. There's also culling. You can cull, which is not exactly great, because then you're like basically working in reverse, because now you're breeding and then you're shooting in anyway. So you don't really want to go into that direction. So
yeah, so it sounds like actually, even if we were to be able to be rich enough and have enough land and give them 5,000 hectares, which would be ideal, you still wouldn't really want them breeding, because it's still actually captive breeding. Even though it's 5,000 hectares, we're still going to run into all sorts of issues with regards to, they're not wild lions, and those lions can't be introduced. So when you say Kruger, just for our listeners, say Kruger means the Kruger National Park, which is South Africa's huge game reserve. None of the lions we're talking about, captive bred lions or lions from sanctuaries, could ever be released into the true wild, which is something like Kruger National Park or the big wild reserves. The wild lions would instantly kill the newcomers. But if, say, I suddenly become extraordinarily blessed with land and money, and I had 5,000 hectares for one pride, because now another thing is we can't mix the lions. So, for instance, I've got all these lions in sanctuary that live in their individual enclosures. I'd have to be extraordinarily blessed because I need 5,000 hectares per group of lions that I have, because we can't just mix the lions. But let's just say I could release, say, 3 of my more wild, capable, healthy lions into a 5,000 hectares. Do you think that would be a big enough area for them to ethically be allowed to hunt? And would they, do you think, hunt?
Yes, it would be an ethically large enough space for them to hunt in. And I believe they would. It would take them some time to develop the skill, but like I said before, the instinct is there. It's just the skill that's lacking, because obviously now you've been feeding them all their lives, basically, that they've been with you, and you just give them a piece over the fence. So they don't need to actually hunt. And then the moment you put them there, you would need to observe them. But yeah, give them some time and they'll figure it out. I do feel sorry for the animals that's going to be hunted. So maybe actually from an ethical point of view, if you have a space like that, make sure that your plains game, so your prey for the lions, are then from an area where there were wild lions. For instance, like then Kruger National Park. So if you had 5,000 hectares and you were like you say, financially very blessed, buy some wildebeest and impala and whatever from them to put them there, because those animals live in a natural state of vigilance and awareness, because they know that there is lions and there is leopards, there's other predators that will hunt them. And then you can potentially do that. Like you say, if you were financially very blessed. But yeah, like that would be the ideal situation. But unfortunately, we cannot just release our lions into an area like this. There's one place that I know that they released 3 lions. They were hand reared, but they were in a long rehabilitation period for quite a few years, and they were released on, I think it's 35,000 hectares. The reserve is called Pinda, and there were no other lions on this reserve. And they were released after, like I said, I'm not sure how long their rehabilitation period was, but it was longer than a year, basically. And they were released on this 35,000 hectares, and they're flourishing. But even on this 35,000 hectares, where these 3 lions were released, the females were only allowed to breed in their 5th year. And they were only basically allowed to breed that 1 year, and then they allowed the cubs to grow up. So there was still enough space then for basically the 2 prides. But now, obviously, it's not different. So they then eventually had to say, okay, well, now we cannot breed anymore. Now we actually have to just wait for them to die of old age. So just to give an idea of, they did a fantastic thing, but at the end they were still faced with the fact that they couldn't actually naturally leave them to breed. They had to then step in and manage them from that point of view. I think that's it.
Thank you. Thank you very much for spending the time chatting to me about lions. Although, to be honest, you and I chat about lions a great deal. When you
Yes, all
I'll
the time,
see
for
you.
hours and hours, and the next hours and hours is going to be karate.
Yeah, you're going to chat karate. But yeah, that's what makes lion quirks. And I know that all those listeners out there who are cat people or lion people, you're also lion quirks. So feel free to comment and get involved and let us know what else you want to hear about. I can always invite Yolandie back on the show. So anytime you want to hear more from her, send us questions. Tell us what you want to hear. And join the Lion Quirk family. I'll see you, Yolandie, next time you come and visit Puku.
Absolutely. And thank you for taking care of her, and thank you for having me on your show. And Lion Quirks, here we come.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Good night.
That's it. We're done.
Is that it?
We're done.